deliberately elected to, enter this altered state, and what do you hope to learn, and what do you want to bring back from it? And I think that is a question that people should ask themselves before they take psychedelics. They should not do it thoughtlessly, or they're likely to be surprised. And that's okay too. But, even if they part of the reason you take it is that you don't exactly know what's going to happen. But if you approach it experimentally, like any good experiment, you should try and control the variables that you can. So, probably better to take it in a situation that you can control rather than one that you can't control. And I think that's where the limits of psychedelics show up, But we don't really understand these substances that much any more than we understand the limits of consciousness. We've been conscious beings on this earth. It's hard to say when consciousness first appeared in primates, but at least a couple of million years. And here we are in 2011, and we still don't understand consciousness on just about every level that you can imagine. And so the same is true of psychedelics. It's not that they haven't been around for a long time. They have. Certain groups have used them for millennia, and they've developed certain approaches to using them. That doesn't mean that even they understand everything there is about them.
Thank you. That actually makes a lot of sense.
Does that kind of answer the question?
Yeah.
Okay.
So my next question is that some practices seem to be an interim step, not the end goal, like training wheels on a bike. Mm-hmm. Do you find that psychedelics are training wheels for another practice or purpose and are let go over time? Or are there goals where ongoing uses of psychedelics is useful?
Well, some people say that they're training wheels, that they're a way that you can peek into these altered states or these transcendental states, but then once you've had that peak, it doesn't make you enlightened, and it doesn't stick. You can kind of like visit these transcendental states, but then you're back in ordinary reality. You're back in, your body. You're back, and you're pretty much the same jerk you were before. But I don't think that's true. I think that psychedelics provide a learning experience, and what you do with that experience is really up to you. Some people may take it once or twice in their lives, and they may say, okay, I get it. I don't need to take psychedelics anymore. I've learned what there is to learn. Although I would caution people that say that you can't really, describe you can't cover the whole dimension of what they can be about with one or two experiences. You can work with these things all your life and never really approach the totality of what they're capable of. If you look at works like Benny Shannon's work with ayahuasca, I don't know if you know that work, that his book, Antipodes of the Mind, but he was a cognitive psychologist, and he basically went out and decided, I'm going to take a lot of ayahuasca under every possible circumstance. I'm going to keep careful notes and write the phenomenology of ayahuasca. So he approached it very systematically, and he contributed to the body of knowledge. Do I think he's completely covered the body of knowledge that you can learn from ayahuasca? Not by a long shot. So I don't think that it's useful to say, well, ayahuasca or psychedelics are inferior to meditation, for example. Mm-hmm. Meditation is one thing. Meditation is an approach to another tool, if you will, for studying consciousness. It should not be confused with psychedelics. They are different tools. They can both teach you different things. One is not inherently superior or inferior to another any more than a screwdriver is inferior to a hammer. They both have their place. It depends on what you're using, what you're using that tool for. So I think you can, I think you can learn a lot from meditation. And yoga and other types of deliberately altered states, frenetic dancing, many of the techniques that shamans have traditionally used that don't involve the use of psychoactive substances, but that do generate profoundly altered states of consciousness. These are all tools in the armamentarium to study this phenomenon of consciousness and to study, and to use it in our own spiritual development. The right tool for the right job. I don't think it's useful to particularly judge one as superior to the other. Mm-hmm. I don't think that people, the other caution or the other caveat I would make here is that psychedelics are not going to enlighten you. If you're stupid, they're not going to make you smart. If you're an asshole, it's not going to make you into a good person. That is the work. What it can do is show you things, and then you've got to do the work. You've got to do the work on your own. So, I'm sure we all know many people who take lots of psychedelics and are, anything but enlightened. And then we know other people who say, well, yeah, that guy really learned some lessons because he took psychedelics. And we know some people like that too. In fact, again, referring to Roland Griffith's study, I don't know if you saw this study that just came out with psilocybin. They widely did analysis of people's personalities to the extent that they can measure that. These are all pretty crude ways to look at it, but they showed that that the psychedelic produced a more sense of openness in the person's personalities. They were more open to new ideas. They were, essentially more relaxed about. They were not so rigid, I guess you could say, and that was an effect that persisted. They measured it immediately after the trial and a year later, and I think a year and a half later. And most people who felt that the experience benefited them felt the same way a year later or many months later. They felt that the lessons had stuck and, had an influence on the way they lived their lives going forward.
That makes sense why that people would think that there was that one or two times would be enough. In the path of consciousness, it would be a good step forward. And so that makes sense to me, especially if it's lasting. Lenny has a follow-up question.
Okay. Hi, Dennis. This is Lenny. You were talking about Roland Griffith and his study at Johns Hopkins on mystical experiences. And I was wondering, how does one measure subjective experiences in a study like that? And how are the populations selected, and how are variables controlled? And it just seems kind of incongruous to have a mystical experience in a hospital setting. So I was wondering if you could describe a little bit about that study.
About Roland Griffith's mysticism study?
Yeah. Yes.
Okay. Yeah. The psilocybin study that he initially did was. It was remarkable. It was got a lot of positive feedback, even from people that are very skeptical that psychedelics have any use. But they did have to admit that it was a very well designed study. In other words, all the variables were controlled for the subjects in the study. They were all so-called drug-naive subject. They had never taken a psychedelic before, but they had a an interest in spiritual matters. They had an interest in consciousness. Some of them were religious. Some of them were secular, but still spiritually inclined. And then they had all these pretty rigorous instruments, they call them, not machines, but more like questionnaires and interviews and that kind of thing, to quantitatively assess people's reaction to their experiences. And I think there were about 60 people in the study. 60% of the subjects said that it was among the 5 most significant experiences of their lives. And of that group, I think approximately 35 to 40% of the people said that it was the most significant experience of their lives, the most meaningful experience of their lives. So that's a pretty amazing outcome if you think about it.
Oh, it's incredible.
Yeah, I mean, if a pharmaceutical company came out with a pill that said, take this and you will have the most meaningful experience of your life, wouldn't we want the FDA to approve that? Wouldn't we all want that? But yeah, but I mean, we do have it. We have the substance, but of course, it's illegal.
That reminds me that I was reading in Stephen Jobs' obituary from the New York Times on the 5th of October that he said that taking LSD was one of the 2 or 3 most important things he had done in his life. He said that there were things about him that people who had not tried psychedelics, even people who knew him well, including his wife, could never understand. And when you talked about it having that's the end of the quote. And then when you mentioned how it seemed to have a result of having people feel less rigid and more open, I'm thinking that maybe we should, maybe the powers that be should be trying this stuff. And that's my comment.
No doubt. I mean, I think the powers that be should try these things. I think it could make a great difference, in the world if you could get world leaders to take ayahuasca together, for example. If you could ever reach that point, it could make a lot of difference because it does open you up and they help reduce inhibitions, and you could just have some honest communication. And that's actually, I mean, that was kind of what back in the 60s there were 2 camps. There was the Aldous Huxley camp, and there was the Ken Kesey camp or the Tim Leary camp. And their view was that everyone should take LSD, that this is a drug for everyone. And Aldous Huxley was, accused of elitism because he said, well, no, it's not for everyone, but important people should take whatever that meant. I think he meant intellectual leaders, scientists, political leaders, people that really, can be change agents in the society. They should take it. And, and I think there's something to that. I mean, I think, they're not for everybody, but I think that, I think that people shouldn't be, I think that should be a personal decision. But I think if you could get world leaders to take it or other change agents, Steve Jobs is a good example, because he's only taken LSD once or twice by his own admission, and it was very influential in him. And, you can see the results. I mean, you can't tell me that the iPhone or some of these other things that he's come up with I don't know if he had the full-blown vision on LSD, but I think he certainly intuited that, he could make these machines that delight people. The iPhone is right out of DMT land. I mean, it's pretty psychedelic if you think about it. It glows, it chirps, it's friendly, it beeps, it's nice looking. It makes you want to interact with it.